What's up, guys? Welcome to the Dad Edge podcast. I'm Larry Hagner, your host and founder of this podcast, show, and movement. Yes. We are talking about that topic. That's what brought you here. You guys saw on the banner, you guys know the title of this show. You know the subject we're talking about this show. Porn kills love. That's a quote that I found online not too long ago. It's perfectly appropriate for this particular show. Not to mention the fact that a quote from my guest today is, if you live life the hard way, life becomes easy. If you live life the easy way, life becomes hard. That's a quote from my guest today. We are talking about this very topic. And listen, guys, I'm just going to be real with you. Porn is the lowest hanging fruit as it pertains to one of the most addictive things out there for men. And a lot of it is because of the way we view it. It's like it's innocent. It's not really that big of a deal. Nobody really knows. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not getting hammered. I'm not getting all doped up on drugs. It's like this thing. And in fact, some guys I used to have this view too, which is kind of crazy, which is like, well, I know my wife isn't really in the mood for it every day. So I'm kind of doing her a favor if I'm taking care of myself. So I'm actually doing good to the relationship. And what we don't realize is there's a deep psychological, emotional, mental bandwidth impact to us when it comes to porn. And many of us are, quite frankly, we just don't realize it. We don't know all the psychology behind it, how it impacts our psyche, our mental, emotional, how we view women, how we view our intimate relationship with our wives. And obviously what I'm finding out as a father of teenage boys is how does this affect our generation today? I know if you guys are right around my age, you grew up in a generation where you had to somehow, some way get your hands on a dirty magazine, or maybe if you were lucky, a VHS tape. You guys have heard me talk about this in other podcasts, but I remember hanging out with this group of younger boys, when I was 12, all of us were 12. One guy, no kidding around, traded his bike for 3 Hustler magazines. A bike, a mongoose, not even a cheap bike, a mongoose bike for 3 Hustler magazines. So this is a big topic. And here's the funny thing that I'll share before we jump into who my guest is today. But I love doing these shows on pornography because it's a great topic to open up. Number one, when we talk about it, we take away its power. We take away the guilt, shame, and the blame and the taboo. Let's talk about these topics, how we can be better at it. But also, it gets very little engagement on social media. I don't want to like that. I don't want to comment on that. But the downloads are crazy, absolutely crazy. So we are giving you guys skills and tactics on how to overcome this particular addiction. And we're also going to be talking about why is it so powerful in the first place? Why do we battle with this thing so hardcore? So my guest today is Matt Sinkovitz. He has been a practitioner and teacher of personal and spiritual development over a decade. He's an avid student of mindfulness, meditation. He also graduated from the Blue Mountain School of Mindfulness Arts. It's a seminary program. He graduated from this back in May of 2018. He's got a master's in Buddhist ministry and was ordained as an Osho priest in May of 2019. In this capacity, he now serves as a spiritual guide and interfaith chaplain in prisons and in hospitals. But here's where these two roads collide. So Matt began his studies in Buddhism and New Thought as a young adult, seeking resolution in his own personal life dilemmas. Overcoming his 20-year compulsive relationship with porn, Matt was inspired to share his journey and support with other men in their path to liberation. And through his online Facebook community, which, by the way, I'm a part of, I was on his podcast not too long ago. It's called Porn to Purpose. Matt currently runs a 90-day liberation boot camp, as well as a 7-day porn abstinence challenge. Matt is passionate about the community's commitment to supporting committed fathers and committed husbands in ending their toxic relationship with porn so they can reignite their passion in their relationships, be better role models to their kids. Matt, dude, thank you for being brave, coming on and not only talking about this topic, but also forging the path for us guys. So good on you, man.
Hey, Larry, thanks so much, brother. It's been quite a journey, and I'm honored to be here with you today, brother. Really appreciate the invitation.
Me too. I gotta be honest. Before you and I did this podcast, I didn't know you I didn't know, first of all, I didn't know Buddhist was a part of what you do. I actually had no idea you went and got all the certifications and education that you did. That's fascinating. Did you grow up with that, or did you grow up maybe more in the Christian faith?
I grew up in the Christian tradition, Larry, and even today, now this might not resonate with some people, just to kind of depending on their experience and understanding of maybe the Buddhist tradition. But I really consider myself very much an interfaith man. I'm still very much grounded and rooted in the Christian tradition, which is where I grew up, the teachings and the principles of Christ. But yeah, brother, I grew up in the heavy kind of Pentecostal tradition, grew up in missions work and prisons work. Some of my earliest experiences were growing up visiting inmates with my parents. And when I was young, I was like 13 years old. My mom and we smuggled Bibles into China with a group of missionaries. And, so I grew up, and those seeds were planted in me very early, kind of like late teens, early 20s. I was just going through a lot of personal conflict and was really a very unhappy place in life. And I was really desiring to better understand my mind, what was going on inside of myself. And it was around that time I began digging deeper and began exploring meditation and mindfulness, which ultimately led me to the Buddhist tradition. But I find the Buddhist tradition is something that really actually can work with any faith tradition. It's more of a philosophy and a way of life, more so than a religion. So that's kind of where I sit now. And as you mentioned in my bio there, over the past several years, I've been doing interfaith work in prisons and hospitals, going as an interfaith chaplain, and just spent a year as a resident in one of a big level 1 trauma center as an interfaith chaplain. So yeah, that's my path, and that's kind of part of what brought me here, brother.
Wow. When did porn start for you? I mean, obviously you said 20 years ago, but do you remember the moment?
Man, you know what? There's like a couple glimpses, and when you look back as a kid, so we talked about some of your early experiences on the podcast over in our community, like a month or so back, and I had like a couple flashes, man. It's like I remember walking into like this, rickety old like automobile garage with my dad one time, and there's like all these, naked pictures of ladies on the side of a filing cabinet. I remember that was one of my first glimpses. You mentioned, being a kid and like what was if you were lucky enough to get your hands on a VHS tape or something like that was me. Like for us, it was the Spice Channel, was the Fuzzy Spice Channel. It was like channel 96. And if you could go to it, you could still make some stuff out. And there's like a Playboy channel, I think, too. Some of my friends had the ultimate, like that. They had that decoder thing that would decode, unscramble the channels, and so that was it for me, man. I don't know if I can exactly say the very first time I was introduced to it, but I think probably 11, 12, 13. I remember definitely being out back at my friend's house in the clubhouse with some penthouses or something. We were up there, and kids were really giving me the inside scoop or what was going on with it and all this stuff. And that was some of my first experiences with it, brother.
And then, so how did this, obviously, what is your relationship with porn, and then what did it turn into?
I think as a kid, man, it was just very, very curiosity based, like, wow, what is this? It was exciting. It was stimulating. It was intriguing. I think it was a part of me exploring my sexuality. It was like the first time you kind of got to like maybe really on a deeper level, like begin to consider like the birds and the bees and like, oh man, what's really going on here? I did grow up in I love, and I'm still very close to the Christian faith and the Christian tradition, and I honor my family and my roots. So I always want to like put that first, I should say, and I grew up in a home and just in an environment where I didn't feel very comfortable talking about sex or exploring my own sexuality. And it wasn't like it was a bad thing in my home, but we just didn't talk about it much. And so I think whenever I was introduced to like sex and porn as a young kid, it was like this whole new world that was very new to me and very intriguing to me. And so I was also a shy kid. So I think for me, it was kind of a way to bridge that, my a connection with women and meet some of those needs maybe as a kid. And I wasn't very comfortable like around girls and stuff. So I think that's what it was for me. But as I grew older and then like I look back now and I noticed like in my 20s, it was still a part of my life. And then I would be choosing to sit home and watch porn and masturbate on a Friday or Saturday night versus going out. You know what I mean? And I think it was around those times when I began to kind of recognize, or maybe I would watch porn and then try and go out later in the evening with my friends and just kind of noticed that I felt kind of grimy and kind of weird and didn't really feel like engaging with women. And it was around those kind of, I would say, young adult years when I kind of began to recognize that maybe this isn't so cool, you know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, man. And just for some context here, you're married, correct?
I'm single. I'm single, no children.
No,
Yep.
single, no children. Okay, so
Correct. Yep.
I'm curious, what have you seen? How long have you been helping husbands and fathers break through?
I've been doing this about 3 years. I founded our community back in 2019 and really began focusing in on this.
What do you find are the main reasons that married men with kids use porn?
Oh man, that's a great question. And that's really the work that the men get to do whenever they come into our community and begin working with us is to explore that for themselves. There's a handful of reasons, Larry, but I think there are a handful of common ones. One of the most common excuses, we'll say, or one of the most common reasons men use is, hey, I'm not very active intimately or sexually within my marriage, within my relationship. So I use porn as a way to kind of meet that need, that need and that desire for intimacy in my relationship. Many men, I think, are often mistaken by that, kind of missing the fact that it could very well be their relationship with porn, which is affecting the quality and the levels of intimacy in their relationship. And maybe they're missing that. But that's a big one, man. And so what is intimacy? Intimacy is love. I think intimacy is connection. And to me, I'm sorry. So what does the porn thing really do? It's intimacy, it's love, it's connection. I think that's what a lot of men are really seeking. Oftentimes they're not aware or conscious of it, which is the work we get to do, is really go down and look deep. All right, what am I really attempting to achieve here? Because it's not just always a sexual need that we're going after. So that's one. Another big one, Larry, is stress, de-stressing. And men use porn and justify porn for that, like as a treat. You know, as you mentioned, a lot of guys say, hey, I'm not hurting anybody here. I'm not going outside of my marriage or my relationship. Maybe my wife even knows, and I deserve it, man. I'm stressed out. It's my kind of way to unplug, and it's my own little thing. I've always had it. Just like some people are best friends with their cigarettes, and those cigarettes, man, they mean a lot to them. And some people have a similar relationship with porn. So I think intimacy and stress are some of the big ones. Another one I often hear is just boredom, lack of stimulation, just looking for something to do. Some people eat when they're feeling, lack of stimulation. Some people smoke a cigarette. Some people go to porn. I think that's another very common one, Larry.
That makes a lot of sense. Especially the de-stress one. So like we always hear these terms, right? Being pumped up, overwhelmed, like, stress is high. People need something from you every day. Your kids need this, your wife needs that. You're not getting your needs met. It almost seems like this perfect storm for a man, just to be quite honest. And the way we viewed it is like, man, I just need some relief. Like I had another expert come on and talk about this, and he talked about self-regulation. It's like, I just need to regulate some of my feelings right now. I feel very overwhelmed. I feel very stressed out. And I had an additional expert on the topic talking about how just the way we're wired as men is we want to empty. So we want to empty, like we want to release, right? Same thing is like, so even when our wives come to us with a ton of like emotion or overwhelmed, right? We want to empty her feelings of stress, and we basically want to help, right? We want to problem solve. We want to de-stress, deload even somebody else, right? So we look at these things as like, a man feels better and a man feels that he can operate when he is emptying himself, right? And that's a physical thing and a mental thing when it comes to porn. I want to talk about it, and I want to know just any type of just in-depth knowledge of things that, what does porn do to the brain?
Well, I mean, one of the things it does, Larry, is it wires us for the need to go to these dopamine receptors. Just like drug addiction or heroin addiction, we might be seeking that dopamine fix. And there's a real correlation out there today between like pornography and the fix that we get off of pornography and the fix that we get off of social media and scrolling. It's a dopamine fix oftentimes that we're looking for. And what happens oftentimes, due to the neuroplasticity of the brain, we are literally like rewiring and hardwiring our brain to need to go to this hardcore, very stimulating material in order to feel satisfaction, to feel relief, to feel joy, to feel pleasure, and certainly to experience sexual satisfaction. So it sets the bar for us. Sets the bar very high for us in terms of us being able to experience pleasure and certainly sexual arousal. It desensitizes us in many ways. And a book that we actually point our brothers to inside of our program and inside of our curriculum is a book called Your Brain on Porn, which is a really fascinating look at the way that pornography does affect the brain and the way that we are literally rewiring the brain to be dependent upon pornography for joy and for sexual satisfaction.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. This particular thing, it's very sneaky. Sneaky. I'm not saying sneaky is, men sneaking off. Like porn, it's just sort of how it infiltrates us, right? And the way we view it. And we're like, oh, it's not really all that harmful. It's not that bad. Like, it's not that bad. It's not like I'm in here like sniffing lines of cocaine or anything like that. But as you're talking about what it's doing to the brain, the first drug that actually came to my mind, even though I have zero firsthand experience with it, is cocaine, because I've heard how addictive cocaine is. And it's almost like you've set the bar for, I don't know. Like I said, I've never done it, but like maybe euphoria or maybe energy or whatever it is, whatever that thing that cocaine hits. And people are just like, oh my gosh, like I've never even experienced a level of feeling like that. And now you basically an everyday feeling that we have, like, and just how we feel every day as normal people, like, you're like, oh my gosh, like that doesn't even feel right to me anymore. Now that I've experienced this. Is porn the same way?
Yeah, I think it is. And one of the big issues, I mentioned sexual arousal, sexual stimulation, and raising the bar so high. So we constantly view and consume and condition ourselves for this really ultra stimulating, unrealistic, hardcore material. And then we kind of begin to miss the point around just healthy connection, healthy intimacy. Before you know it, like just regular sexual connection or intimacy, or just being close, which can be arousing, with our partner. It's like it just doesn't do us. It doesn't do it for us anymore. It sets the bar so high, and I think that's where a lot of guys find themselves dissatisfied, because they're just unexcited and certainly unstimulated in their intimate lives as a result of it, Larry. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. What have you found is one of the most useful things that a man can do? I have seen in my own experience, even firsthand, when I used to really battle with this, is that the more I tried to resist porn, the more powerful it got. And the more that I tried to just simply replace the urge or the habit or the temptation with something else, the easier it got. What have you found has been the most useful tools for men to implement when they're like literally just getting started and trying to get away from this?
Yeah, brother, I think that's an important question. So the first thing, and I think you'll relate to this because you're a community leader, but one of the first things I think men can begin to do is just get into community, get into conversation, get around other men who are having this conversation. And as you mentioned, normalizing the conversation. It's such a taboo, secretive, lonely journey and porn is one of these things that we carry around in the world very often, all by ourselves, with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and a lot of heaviness. And it's like, whenever it hides in the darkness, it's like it grows and it festers, and we deal with it ourselves, and it regurgitates over and over. And I think the more we try and resist it and fight the battle by ourselves, it's like it does feel stronger than us. It does feel like this compulsion that comes over the body that we can't control. And I think getting into community and getting around other men who are on this same path, and kind of recognizing you're not alone. You're not the only weirdo out there. Maybe you're not a weirdo at all. Maybe it's just a normal part of being a man in today's society. And it's a part of the normal part of the human condition and experience. And just beginning to normalize the conversation is a really big piece of the puzzle. And beyond that, so you talked about replacement. I think one of the most important things we can do, Larry, so we're a mindfulness-based community, and my experience with mindfulness and meditation has played a huge part in my journey, and now is really fundamental in what we teach our men. And such a big piece of the puzzle is really a willingness to slow down and look at what's going on inside of us. A lot of us men are disconnected emotionally and emotionally unconscious. So like, stress, whatever, anger, fear, life, whatever it is comes up inside of us. We experience this energy, these emotions inside of us. Oftentimes we're not even aware of them, but we just want to check out. We just want to relieve it. We just want to empty, as you used the word earlier. So a lot of us are really just doing our best to cope with life. And again, porn and sex has always been our thing. So something that's really important, Larry, I think, is a daily, we teach a daily practice of meditation every single day, which cultivates a willingness to slow down and actually look at what's going on inside of us. If we're willing to slow down and watch as these urges, as these emotions, as these impulses arise within us, these things which drive us to the porn, we can begin to see them and say, okay, I'm experiencing something here. I'm experiencing this desire to want to reach and grasp for something. But I can also recognize that maybe it's not just porn that I'm seeking. Maybe I am desiring intimacy. Maybe I am desiring connection. Maybe I am desiring stress relief. Maybe I'm just feeling tired and emotional and I'm just reaching for something right now. So I think something men can begin to do is slow down and really cultivate like greater levels of awareness around what's going on inside of them and what's driving the behavior. And that might sound complex, but it could really just start with the daily practice of 5 minutes a day, just sitting in quietness and just observing what's going on inside of you. And once we do that, once we like turn on the lights in the dark room, we can begin to see what's going on inside of us, and we can begin to make different choices. And we can begin to say, hey, I recognize that this behavior is not going to serve me, even though it feels like in the moment it will. And we can begin to make new choices. And that's where the replacement comes in, as you mentioned earlier, Larry.
And for those of us who are not necessarily familiar with optimal meditation, and maybe one of the reasons we're meditating is to have some more mindfulness around our habits around porn. What do you do, or what do you teach? And it's very, very specifically as it pertains to meditation.
Mm-hmm. So I recognize that. And sometimes, a guy might hear this and he might say, oh, meditation's not for me. I'm always on go, go, go. There's this old Buddhist saying that says, if you do not have 20 minutes a day to sit in meditation, then take an hour. Like if you feel like you can't slow down and you're just on go, 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 and you're not designed for it, well, then that's a wonderful reason and invitation to explore it. So to answer your question very specifically, I recognize it's not a normal thing for a lot of people. It's not a go-to instinct, but it is a practice, and it's something we practice. So for me, the most basic meditation, and this is not religious whatsoever, I think it's just a healthy human practice, is just to sit for 5 minutes a day and just put your hands in your lap, close your eyes, and just watch your breath. Watch your breath as your breath comes in through the nose, it fills up your belly, and then back out. In through the nose, filling up the belly, and then back out. And that's it. 5 minutes a day, it can begin just there. And you notice at first that the mind's really active. You feel agitated. You feel like, oh, I got to go do this. I got to go do that. We begin to observe just how active and chaotic the mind is, and just how active and chaotic our emotions are, and how very often we're a slave to them. So a slave to these impulses, a slave to the stuff that's going on inside of us. So that's it, brother, is just to sit 5 minutes a day and just place our attention on the breath as it comes into the nose, fills up the belly, and back out. And when our mind wanders and drifts off and we notice we're in la la land, that's okay. We just simply, without judgment, return to the breath over and over. It's like training a puppy to sit. And it's called a practice for a reason. It's because it requires work. And there's no outcome we're trying to achieve. We're just settling down. We're allowing the dust to settle and familiarizing ourselves with what's going on inside of us. And what this also cultivates, Larry, is a willingness to, okay, I see I have a thought, but I don't have to act upon that thought. I recognize that I'm having an emotion right now. I'm experiencing this urge or this impulse, but I don't have to act out of it. All of our lives as children and our youth, we've acted out of emotions. But now as conscious adults, we can learn to see, okay, just because I'm having this experience or this urge or this impulse, I can sit with it and I can be with it. And as we do that, we can learn to watch as the emotion comes up And then if we just stay with it, it just goes away and we're actually fine. We're not going to die. We can actually be with our emotions. And I think that's the sign of a healthy, mature man. So that's really the beginning of it, man. And then we do go a little bit more advanced in our work, and we do some meditations around self-love, connection with ourselves, grace, forgiveness, self-acceptance. We kind of move into that a little bit with some of our guys because that's such a big piece of the puzzle as well. To not be so hard on ourselves, give ourselves a little bit of room for growth. But a great starting point is just 5 minutes a day, just watching the breath, man. You'll learn so much about yourself just doing that.
No, I appreciate that, man. I think there's some fear sometimes for men to slow down. Like sometimes our emerging thoughts might scare us, or we might just sitting with ourselves. I think we've become a society of human doings and not human beings. And just
Amen.
simply, right? Just simply being a human being is very tough for us. Like it is really hard, man. And so I appreciate that though, the encouragement to just be okay with being uncomfortable sitting with yourself in silence and seeing what happens. I also want to share, I want you to share maybe a story or two, or maybe some things that you've seen just in your own experience doing this, because I think one of the most powerful things that you and I you can explain here is, I think a lot of us view this as like, hey, we're kind of, this is really innocent. This is not going to really upset anything. This is not going to upset any apple cart. Like I'm not hurting anyone. Although you and I both know that we've seen the nightmare situations happen when our wives find out. Some wives are laid back about it. They're like, oh yeah, it's fine. It's what dudes do. Like that's one type of wife. Although I think those are far and few between. And then there are some wives that are like, that doesn't sit well with me at all. And then there are some wives that view it as this is the ultimate, emotional affair, right? And they feel completely like basically you have cheated on her. And we don't view it that way. We view it as innocent. But what's one or two stories or situations where you've seen where this is really blown up in a man's face and he's like, wow, I didn't expect that it would be this bad?
Yeah, brother. I have a lot of stories, and the fact of the matter is, I speak with men about this nearly every day, in conversation one way or another, and what I most often see is this relationship with pornography, where it's a part of a man's life, it's a part of his life ever since he's a young kid, and yeah, oftentimes the wife doesn't know about it, but it becomes something that becomes a more and more regular part of his life. And I think one of the scariest things that I've seen, Larry, is, pornography addiction. And this was like a part of my journey. So if you want to tie in like a story to it, this was part of my story. I'll give you mine is, after 20 years relationship with porn, I began to recognize that, I was in my 30s, and I began to recognize first and foremost that I had tried, I had attempted, I had committed to quitting multiple times, and I continued to return. So like, no matter what I did, I found that I didn't have a certain level of control over my relationship with porn. And what I also began to recognize was, due to the nature of porn, maybe you can relate to this, Larry, is that porn began to grow in terms of the graphic nature of what I was viewing. It's like you need more hard stuff and more hard stuff and more hard stuff and more extreme and more taboo. And after a while, you find yourself watching and viewing stuff that really doesn't align with like who you are or what you really want for yourself. And maybe it's exciting and stimulating on the screen, but you're like, yeah, but I really don't want that. And maybe after you get done watching, you kind of feel like this shame around it and this guilt, like, man, what am I really doing? And that's when we really recognize that we're out of integrity with ourselves. So that's where I found myself in my journey, Larry, was like being in my 30s, recognizing that I couldn't quit and it wasn't getting any better. It was like getting more and more extreme. I'm like, where does this end up in 10 years? Where does this end up in 20 years? I don't want to end up some old kind of weird perverted man. Like, who knows where this could go? And I'm not just calling, guys out there that view porn perverts, but that was kind of my story. I'm like, I don't want to be this guy. And that's most often what I see for the men that come into our community, man, is like, it gets more and more extreme, more and more graphic in nature. And that's where it really begins to blow up. Yes, some women are really sensitive to it. And any viewing of pornography is seen as like infidelity. You know, it's like seen as going outside of the marriage, like an emotional affair. Um, but what can oftentimes happen is I have firsthand experience with brothers that their pornography genres do get more and more extreme, and they end up viewing really dark, kind of twisted, sadistic material. And then the wife finds out about that. And she says, "What are you doing? Like, what are you watching?" And then, the guys hear stuff like, "You're so sick. You're so perverted. I can't believe it." And the wife becomes disgusted, and like all the intimacy, all the romance, all that stuff just disintegrates because the woman just ends up kind of disgusted with the man. In many cases, I've seen the porn turning into greater levels of acting out. So maybe a man's viewing it, then he's having an affair with women online because now it's webcam days. So guys are viewing that. So that turns into another level of kind of, infidelity, if you will. And then it turns into, acting out with physical people meeting up, and then legal stuff comes up, or affecting other people's marriages comes up. So these are kind of like the general stories that I see because I speak with people so regularly. This is just kind of like the regular accounts of what I see. People beginning to act out, or what they're viewing becoming so twisted that it really disgusts them and their partner, or even they begin getting into legal issues around it because of the content that they're viewing.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
That's pretty deep, without a doubt. So let me just ask you just personally. I have found, and I'll ask this question first, and while you think about it, I'll just share a couple of things that I've noticed. So in the absence of pornography in my life, what I've noticed is, number one, the way that I view intimacy with my wife has totally changed. And I've been away from porn for quite some time. I'm not going to sit here and lie to anybody saying I don't get tempted by it. I just actually talked about this in the Alliance group, because porn, us talking about porn in the Alliance, it's like just another thing. Oh, it's sunny outside. I looked at porn today. We remove the taboo and the power away from it. It's an everyday conversation. Nobody judges anybody. In fact, everybody's actually usually really relieved that we all bring it up, which is extremely helpful. But one of the things that I've noticed, being away from it for as long as I have, and let me go back to the temptation part. We had a guy who posted in the group. He's like, "Man, I'm struggling with this topic. I'm struggling with how do I get away from it?" And, I basically chimed in, and I was like, the more you think about resisting it, the more powerful it, at least in my experience, the more powerful it has become. So instead of if I feel tempted, or if I feel pumped up, if I feel stressed out, or I just, want to go down that, if I'm tempted to go down that road, what I'll automatically ask myself now, and it took a while to get there, but I'll ask myself, what can I do in place of this that is going to be a positive effect? Or what can I do what can I go create? Right? Maybe I'll write my kid a note. Maybe I'll send somebody one of our hats, just in the mail, just being something nice, right? Just do something for somebody else. The other day, I was just it was one of those times, I haven't felt tempted in a while, and I felt kind of tempted. And I was like, I'm just going to go walk my dog. If the weather's nice outside, I'll go walk the dog. The dog needs to be walked. He turns into a crazy dog if he doesn't. I'll just go do that. And by literally 15 steps outside of my door, that's all I needed to do. And it was gone. Right. And I was like, oh man, I'm so glad I did that. Dog's outside, I have fresh air, vitamin D. This is awesome. But one thing I've noticed too is that when porn was taken out of the mix of my life, I started to notice different things that I thought were always there were magnified. So for instance, and what I mean, the good things. So intimacy with my wife, physical touch with my wife. It just sometimes, just like you said, laying next to her and just holding her, running my fingers through her hair while we watch TV. It was almost like I was so much more physically, mentally, and emotionally in moments like that. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I wasn't before, but it was almost like it was magnified, or it was 10x when I was away from it, because I was just like, man, this is really cool. I think when you start to remove yourself from it for a long enough period of time, you start to see those really positive aspects that are happening. It's kind of like being on a diet, right? At first you're like, I'm starving. all I can think about is food. This is horrible. And then you get on the scale, you're like, oh, I've lost 8 pounds. But wait a second. I can buckle that belt loop on the 5th hole now instead of the 4th. I feel lighter. I feel better. I feel more confident. And then all of a sudden, the whole food temptation is overtaken by like, but I feel so good and I'm getting so many good results. Like, I don't know if I want to go back. Do you know what I'm saying? So what are some of the positive effects that maybe you have seen, or maybe even some of the guys that you've helped in your community?
Yeah, brother, I would love to share that. So I'll speak to my firsthand experience, and I'll give you an example of one of our guys in our community. So for myself, everything you mentioned there, we talked earlier about, it's really interesting, man. It's like porn is one of those things that's been a part of our lives for so long. It's like we are unaware of the effects of it. It's much like I smoked cigarettes for probably a decade of my life, and I didn't realize until I began decreasing my cigarette consumption how like terribly they made me feel. I just didn't realize the energetic drag. I didn't realize the way they were giving me headaches and making my mind foggy, and they stank. And I didn't realize it until I got away from it. Same thing with water. I now drink a gallon of water a day typically. And it's like, now I realize how great I feel. But if I don't drink a gallon of water, I'm like, man, I was really dehydrated like before, but I didn't realize it because I wasn't consuming as much water. So that's why I think, that's why we do like our abstinence challenges in our community, because we want to give brothers an opportunity to give themselves a break from it, and give some accountability and some structure and some guidance, because it's like, you kind of don't know what you're missing until you give it a try. Right. So just to name a couple things, as you mentioned, increased levels of intimacy. It's the little things, as you mentioned. It's being close. It's being flirtatious. It's being energetically ready. It's like, I didn't masturbate today, so now my partner wants to, be intimate, and I'm ready. You know what I mean? Like I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good about myself. I'm feeling powerful. It's all the subtle things that are so easy to miss. Again, we talked earlier about how porn really desensitizes us, and we miss all that little sweet, intimate stuff that really, I think, builds and strengthens the relationship. So deeper levels of intimacy, I feel like generally self-confidence, self-esteem, feeling more comfortable and confident within social situations. Again, I didn't realize it, but I recognize now, like, porn makes me feel like if I were watching porn, right, regularly, and then I were to go out into a social setting, I feel kind of weird. I feel kind of slimy. I feel kind of awkward. I feel kind of weak and energetically just, whatever. I didn't realize that porn was really contributing to those feelings. Now without it, I feel strong. I feel confident. I feel clear. My energy levels are higher. One thing that porn did to me, Larry, it was really sabotaging my momentum around business and the work that I felt called to be doing. So I'd be feeling really good about myself. I'd be free a couple of days, a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months. I begin to get into momentum, and then I go back to porn. I relapse, and then it's like self-sabotage, man, and that disrupts all my momentum. It throws off my story. Now I'm feeling unworthy. I'm feeling like I don't deserve. I'm like, you don't deserve to lead others. You don't deserve to be of service to others. You don't deserve to, whatever it is. It's a story, but that's what comes up. And I feel I just want to lay in bed. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling all these things that sabotages momentum. So I find without porn in my life now, I'm able to really maintain a much more regular, like, kind of trajectory around my momentum. Those are just a handful of things for me. Spiritually, porn was acting as a real spiritual ceiling in my life. It was acting as a ceiling around the calling I felt to be doing, to be of service and support of others. I felt that call for many years, but I didn't feel worthy, not having my own stuff cleaned up. So I felt like it was really acting like this ceiling between myself and God in ways. And maybe that wasn't true, but that's what it felt like. I felt like it was inhibiting my spiritual growth. Again, all things you can't see while porn's present. One of our brothers who we just celebrated in our community, he's a 51 or 52-year-old man. We're actually going to be interviewing him in our community today. Last week, he just hit his 1 year porn free. He's a recovering 40-year porn addict. He just hit his first 1 year porn free. And he came to me last year around this time, Larry, and he said, I want to get back to the me that I know I'm supposed to be. And that's one of the biggest things we see is, like, men know that certain men know. Maybe not everyone's awake or conscious of it, but some men know it's just not the way they want to be conducting themselves, but they're like a slave to it, man. They can't get out. And he came to me and he said, I want to get back to the me that I know that I'm called to be. I want to get back to that version of myself when I was a kid. I saw a great man, and I want to be that man, you know? And so, yeah, he just hit his 1 year porn free. He's been a phenomenal student. He's shown up and done all the work and engaged at the level that we ask our guys to. And he's reconnecting with his partner. He's reestablished his relationship with his son. He's getting back into greater levels of intimacy within his partnership, and spending regular time with his kid. He's lost several pounds, at least 10 pounds. He's like losing a pound a week, it seems like now. He just ran a 5K. He came in, he's always had this dream of being a writer. He's now on his second book. You know, he's like, I've taken all this energy, as you mentioned earlier, I've taken all this energy I used to direct at porn, and I've now taken this creative, beautiful life force energy, and I've now redirected it into creating the life of my dreams. And I'm happy and I'm fulfilled. And that speaks to our whole journey of porn to purpose, which is what we help our guys kind of move into. And that's the long-term game, brother. Long answer.
Dude, that's amazing, man. I want to make sure that I want to talk about one other thing here that I think it's really, really hard for even men to talk about or even ask for, and that's accountability around this. Many of us will ask for, hey, I want accountability in my business. If I'm going to move my business forward, then I want to do the next right thing in my business. Hold me accountable to do that. We do this all the time in our health. Hold me accountable to making sure I'm eating right, showing up, doing my workouts, check the box, all that good stuff, right? But when it comes to accountability around pornography, do you have any suggestions around maybe how men can start that conversation with other good men in their life or good friends?
Yeah, this goes back, I think, to one of my earlier suggestions, Larry, and that's get around loving, supporting community such as yourself, community such as ours, where men are normalizing the conversation, and we come from a place of love and grace and say, it's okay here. You know, let's normalize the conversation. Let come just as you are. You're loved here. And I think that's really one of the first things that men can begin to do. And a big emphasis in our community, man, is like men want to be held accountable. But first and foremost, you must be accountable to yourself, because it's not up to me as a community leader or your coach to drag you kicking and pulling and say, hey, you know, of course, I'm going to call you to accountability and say, you made a commitment last week to this, this, and this. Where do you stand with that? And if you did not, then with love, we call you to that. But you got to be first and foremost accountable to yourself. And that's why we really emphasize integrity, personal commitment, learning to keep and be impeccable with our commitments and our word within ourselves first and foremost. How I do anything is how I do everything. And that's why so much of our work is about helping men build and cultivate that commitment muscle so they can learn to keep the commitments first and foremost to themselves. And we help them, you know, build new habits such as daily exercise, daily meditation, daily habits of growth, and journaling. So they're replacing those old habits with the new ones. Our guys are required to check in every single day. It's not just to check in, but it's to build those habits of commitments and to say, I committed to this. I've shown up this way. And of course, we hold them to strong and loving accountability to that. But it really comes down to a man learning to be more impeccable with his own word and holding the commitments first and foremost to himself.
I like how you approach that, because I think if you do the opposite, you're creating a codependent relationship. In other words, my success depends on you as my coach and you as my accountability partner. It doesn't have much to do with me. And you're right. Our success does start and stop with us. Accountability is, it could definitely be the spotter, right? In the gym. It's like, I'm going to help you get this weight up when it starts to get heavy, but you're still pushing the weight. All right. I'm going to make sure you don't fall flat on your face, or that this bar doesn't come crushing down on your chest or your head. Matt, this has been awesome, man. I want to make sure that the men who maybe want to explore more about what you do, they can find you very, very easily. And again, I appreciate you you allowing me to come on your show, and you pulled stuff out of me that quite frankly, I had never talked about on my own podcast, like my first exposure to porn with a family member when I was 9, which was horrific. So if you guys want to go check that out, go check out Matt's show as well, which is Porn to Purpose. But where can guys find just to connect with you, your Facebook community, or anything else you're doing?
Yes, thanks very much for that opportunity, Larry. So, easiest place to connect with me right now is on Facebook. Porn to Purpose is our community. It is a private men's only community. I take a look at every profile that comes in there, make sure we've got high quality, like, profiles in there. It's not just some weird, like whatever accounts with like a cartoon on the face. Like we want to make sure we've got real men in there, so that we build a safe community. So it's a safe place to come and to begin to, even if you're not going to engage in conversation, to see that other men are having the conversation. That might be a great first step. So Porn to Purpose is our private community for men. You can, of course, find me on Facebook. And if you're not on Facebook and you'd like to maybe connect, or maybe to connect more discreetly, you can just send me an email directly at makingpeacewithporn@gmail.com.
Got it. All right. Well, gentlemen, you've heard how to connect with Matt. If you guys want to head on over to this particular show notes, or the show notes, you can head over to thedadedge.com/Friday45. This is the 45th episode of Fierce Friday. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday45. Matt, dude, number one, thank you for leading the charge on this, being bold and being brave. It's not the easiest battle to face. So I appreciate you taking the lead on this. Also, thank you for coming on and sharing your personal struggle and battle with this, and how you've succeeded, and also just some really simple ways of how we can maybe shift our purview of our perception of this, and how we can maybe move forward past these types of temptations, man.
Larry, thanks so much for having me here today, brother. Really appreciate you. Appreciate the work you're doing. And it's been an honor to be here today. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Gentlemen, again, thedadedge.com/Friday45 for all the show notes. Go out, live legendary. Take care.